Emma stood in the toy aisle holding her daughter's hand and feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. 7 years old, and Sarah had asked for just one thing this birthday season. A Barbie doll. Not the fancy kind with all the accessories or the dream house that every commercial seemed to show. Just one simple doll with blonde hair and a blue dress. Emma had seen it in the store window for weeks now, and each time they walked past it, Sarah would press her nose against the glass and smile. That smile used to come so easily before her father left. Before the late rent notices started arriving. Before Emma began working double shifts at the diner just to keep food on the table. Now at 34 years old, Emma felt like she was carrying the weight of 2 lifetimes. She looked down at the price tag and felt her chest tighten. $29.99. It might as well have been $1,000. After paying the electric bill and buying Sarah's school supplies, there was barely enough left for groceries this week. Emma knelt down beside her daughter and tucked a strand of brown hair behind the little girl's ear. Sarah looked up at her with those big, hopeful eyes that reminded Emma so much of herself at that age, back when the world still felt full of possibility. "Baby," Emma whispered, and her voice caught in her throat, "Mama can't afford the Barbie for your birthday this year." She watched her daughter's face and waited for tears or disappointment. But Sarah just nodded slowly and wrapped her small arms around Emma's neck. "It's okay, Mama," Sarah said softly. "I know you work really hard." That response broke Emma's heart more than any tantrum could have. They walked out of the toy store hand in hand, and Emma blinked back tears as they made their way down the busy street. The autumn air was crisp, and leaves were beginning to turn gold and red. It should have felt beautiful, but all Emma could think about was the birthday party they couldn't afford to throw and the cake she'd have to bake from scratch instead of buying from the bakery. She didn't notice the man watching them from across the street. Richard Harrison had built his company from nothing. At 58 years old, he was the CEO of one of the most successful retail chains in the country. He had everything a man could want. 3 houses and more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, and a reputation that opened every door. But he didn't have what mattered most. His daughter Catherine would have been 35 this year if cancer hadn't taken her when she was just 9 years old. 26 years had passed, and the pain still felt fresh some days. He'd been walking past the toy store on his way to another meaningless business meeting when he saw them. A young mother kneeling beside her daughter in front of the Barbie display. The way the little girl looked at that doll reminded him so much of Catherine. And then he saw the mother's face crumble as she spoke to her child. He couldn't hear the words, but he recognized that look. The desperate helplessness of a parent who couldn't give their child what they wanted. Richard had worn that same expression in the hospital when the doctors told him there was nothing more they could do. He watched them leave the store, and something inside him stirred. For years he'd thrown money at charities and foundations, all in Catherine's name. But it had always felt distant and impersonal. This was different. This was real. Richard followed them at a distance, not really sure what he was doing. They walked for 6 blocks until they reached an older apartment building with chipped paint and a crooked front step. He waited outside for a moment after they went in, and then he made a decision. The next morning, Emma was getting ready for her shift at the diner when someone knocked on the door. It was early, and unexpected visitors always made her nervous. She opened it to find a well-dressed older man with kind gray eyes and a gentle smile. "Mrs. Coleman?" he asked. Emma nodded cautiously. "It's Miss actually." "Miss Coleman," he said, "my name is Richard Harrison, and I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I saw you and your daughter at the toy store yesterday." Emma's stomach dropped. Had she done something wrong? Was he with child services? "I'm sorry," she started, but Richard held up his hand. No, please don't apologize," he said quickly. "I'm not here to cause any trouble, and I hope this doesn't come across wrong, but I'd like to buy your daughter that Barbie doll for her birthday." Emma stared at him. "I'm sorry, what?" Richard shifted his weight, and for the first time in decades he felt uncertain. "I lost my daughter many years ago," he said quietly. "She was 9, and she loved dolls just like your Sarah does, and I saw the 2 of you yesterday, and it reminded me that sometimes the smallest gestures can mean everything." Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. "I can't accept that," she said, though her voice wavered. "I don't even know you." "I know," Richard said, "and I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable, but please let me do this, and not just the doll. If you'll allow it, I'd like to help with Sarah's birthday party too." Emma shook her head. "Why would you do that for us?" Richard was quiet for a moment. "Because I can," he said simply. because I have more than I need and you need more than you have, and because I wish someone had been there to help me when Catherine was sick and we were drowning in medical bills before the business took off. Something in his eyes told Emma he was telling the truth. There was a depth of loss there that she recognized. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say yes, Richard said gently. And so she did. The following Saturday, Sarah turned 7 years old. Richard had arranged everything. Not just the Barbie doll, but a small party at the community center with cake and balloons and presents. He'd invited Sarah's classmates and their families. Emma had worried it would be too much and too overwhelming, but Richard had been careful to keep it simple and warm and appropriate. When Sarah walked in and saw the decorations, her face lit up in a way Emma hadn't seen in months. And when she opened the box with the Barbie doll inside, she squealed with delight and threw her arms around her mother. Thank you, Mama, she cried. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Emma looked over at Richard, who was standing quietly in the corner, watching with tears in his eyes. After the party wound down and the last guests had left, Emma approached him. I don't know how to thank you, she said. Richard smiled. You just did by letting me be part of this, he said. You gave me something I haven't had in a long time. What's that? Emma asked. Purpose, he said. Real purpose, not just board meetings and profit margins, but the chance to make a real difference in someone's life. Over the following months, Richard became a presence in their lives. Not intrusive, but steady. He helped Emma find a better job at one of his company's offices. Nothing she wasn't qualified for, but something with benefits and regular hours and the chance to be home for dinner with Sarah. He became like a grandfather to Sarah, taking her to the park on Sundays and teaching her to play chess. For Emma, he became a friend and mentor. Someone who understood loss and struggle and the quiet dignity of starting over. One evening, as they sat on Emma's small balcony, watching Sarah play in the courtyard below, Richard turned to her. You know, he said, I spent 26 years wondering what Catherine's life would have been like if she'd lived, and I tortured myself with all the things we'd never get to do together. Emma listened quietly. But spending time with you and Sarah has taught me something, Richard continued. Catherine's life mattered not because of how long it lasted, but because of the love we shared, and maybe the way to honor that love is to share it with others who need it. Emma reached over and squeezed his hand. She'd be proud of you, she said softly. Richard nodded and smiled. I think she would. Years passed, and the bond between them only grew stronger. Richard walked Sarah down the aisle at her wedding when she was 25. He was there when Emma finally allowed herself to fall in love again with a kind man who treated her daughter like his own. And when Richard passed away at 82, surrounded by the family he'd chosen, Emma and Sarah and their growing clan, he left this world knowing he'd found his way back to love. Because that's what kindness does. It doesn't just change the life of the person who receives it. It transforms the life of the person who gives it. And in the end, that's what matters most. Not the money or the success or the things we accumulate, but the love we share and the lives we touch and the small moments of grace that remind us we're all connected. All of us walking each other home.